Housing affordability is a huge policy challenge in many countries. In this presentation, we will study Australia's housing policy, evaluate its root problems, and propose solutions to address housing challenges. First, the background to the problem in Australia. According to the International Housing Affordability Survey, which covered 9 countries, housing in Australia was deemed to be severely unaffordable, only behind Hong Kong and New Zealand, with a median multiple of 6.4. In addition, of the 378 markets in these 9 countries, 3 Australian cities feature in the list of the top 10 least affordable markets: Sydney, with a median multiple of 9.8, Tweed Heads, 9.1, and Melbourne, 8.7. In fact, it was reported that all of Australia's 5 major metropolitan areas were severely unaffordable for the 11th year in a row. The median multiple is the median house price divided by the median household income. Historically, this house price to income ratio has been recommended by the United Nations. The main causes for housing affordability issues can be analysed using a multifaceted approach involving political, social, and economic dimensions. The framework of a problem tree analysis allows us to identify the causes and the consequences. For political dimension, the government has tried to balance the interests of the homeowners, the investors, and the home buyers, but has not been successful. "I do hope that our housing prices are increasing," said Tony Abbott. "I do want housing to be affordable, but nevertheless, I also want house prices to be modestly increasing." The Prime Minister wishes to pander the electorate, but it is difficult to allow prices to appreciate while making housing affordable to new buyers. For social dimension, home ownership is a key cultural icon of the Great Australian Dream, which encourages buyers through tax incentives. This creates the aspirations and the demand for houses. For economic dimension, despite presence of schemes such as the Housing Affordability Fund that seeks to lower the burden of infrastructure and regulatory costs built to purchase a new home, tax breaks and the absence of a capital gains tax for owner-occupied houses continues to encourage speculation, thereby driving up prices. The lack of supply has been a problem, and wage growth has been low. Thus, housing remained unaffordable as investors and current homeowners remain as main beneficiaries of the government's various economic policies. As a result, the consequences of greater unaffordability fall most on younger households, low-income households, and the older generations, many of whom purchased housing when prices were more in line with historical norms and hence do not face insurmountable financial barriers to home ownership. Currently, the rate of home ownership is 67%, but the rate of growth has been slow to non-existent since the end of the Second World War. Therefore, the long-term goal is to improve the affordability of housing in Australia. There are 3 policy options which will be analysed in detail: expand public housing options for Australians, increase the infrastructure and consequently the supply of houses, and greater regulation to discourage speculation. The first option is to expand public housing. To ensure the satisfaction of housing as a basic need, housing affordability can be improved via the direct provision of public housing, a policy previously adopted by its national government before the 1980s. Direct public housing provision will allow the government to regulate prices and control property speculation, both factors crucial in keeping housing prices low. An example of a country successful in ensuring home ownership is Singapore, where today 82% of Singaporeans live in public homes known as HDBs. Similar to Australia, Singapore is a low-tax nation and not a welfare state. However, it managed to make home ownership more desirable than renting through the combination of other policies such as reliance on one's Central Provision Fund, a mandatory savings scheme, and discretionary housing grants. Australia could potentially adopt a similar system. However, that also involves significant institutional changes which may render its implementation infeasible. Also, current social stigma where public housing is seen as welfare accommodation may reduce predicted demand, and if Australia wants to continue to provide public housing, where should it get its funding without creating more unintended repercussions? The second option is to increase the supply of houses through reducing costs of construction. Lower costs of construction can be achieved via numerous ways, such as reducing restrictions with respect to urban zoning. Current urban containment policy drives price upwards as it reduces the land available for new houses and creates regulatory restrictions that also lead to greater expenses associated with getting planning approvals. The upside of relaxing such regulation is that the increased land supply will pull the cost of construction down and hence house prices. However, insufficient urbanization regulation will also decrease current housing quality and threaten environmentally sensitive areas. The government can also consider increasing foreign labor supply. Currently, average labor cost in the construction industry per employee is about $63,600 per year, above the national average of $53,000 a year. Allowing for foreign labor will allow developers to incur lower construction costs. Nevertheless, the influx of foreign labor may crowd out local labor, causing local incomes in the construction sector to fall. One also has to consider the possible negative sentiments Australians may have over large influx of foreign labor. The third option is to reduce speculative demand. The Australian government can implement tax reforms which soothe the current speculative property market behaviours while still making housing affordable for the low income. For instance, large institutional ownership or speculative ownership can be discouraged via the use of land tax based on the size of one's property portfolio than merely on the value of existing land. This puts homeowners with multiple properties at a disadvantage. Another way is to restrict negative gearing tax breaks only to first-time homeowners. Furthermore, speculation can be contained with the imposition of an occupation-based regulation period, provided if the buyer wants to be eligible for tax incentives. In Singapore, first-time homeowners are prohibited from selling their houses within the first 5 years of ownership. Yet, as this option relies on the private market to supply houses, if regulation period is too long, investors may no longer be drawn to the Australian market. Of the three options, which option would be the most desirable? We have evaluated the three options using criteria including efficiency, equity, security, political acceptability, robustness, and ecological sustainability. Thereafter, values ranging from 1 to 4 are assigned for each category, with 1 being least desirable and 4 being most desirable. Through this evaluation model, option 3 would be the policy option that the Australian government considers first. Reducing speculative demand could drive down prices for the time being. It is also important to note that the three policy options are not mutually exclusive. The first and second policy options of public housing and increasing the supply of houses are long-term strategies, while the third option of reducing speculative demand could be implemented in the near term. Appreciating the pros and cons of the different options highlights the trade-offs involved, so that more effective policies can be crafted.
Created using Powtoon.